SES Experience 2020 Forward Momentum for a New Decade. Who's ready for a new decade? I know I am. So I'm Christy West, and I am so pleased to be here and delighted to serve as your MC. And for those of you that don't know me, well, I wear a lot of hats. I'm an improviser, founder of Brave Space, sales enablement trainer at a SaaS company called Bird Eye. And then, in my spare time, I'm a mom. And then also, I run a corporate learning program for a theater here in Dallas called Stomping Ground. What can I say? I love wearing multiple hats. It keeps me on my toes, and people can't keep up with me. And so I like that. I thought one of the best ways to kick it off today at a conference where there are new and old faces, probably more new faces than what I remember when I started back, in 2017. So for me, my journey's been 4 years long. So I thought I would share my journey with you, and for new people, it would give you a little bit of insight into where it all started and where we've gone and where we're going. It is 4 years, so I'm going to do my very best to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm really going to nutshell this down into the tiniest package that I can possibly think of. So bear with me, and I am going to attempt to take you through 4 years of one person's sales enablement journey. Well, it all started in Atlanta about 4 years ago when I met Tanya with the good hair, Schultz, at a local SES chapter meeting. At the meeting, there was talk of this groundbreaking society for elevating the role of sales enablement. The society was still in its infancy and carried secret weapons like passion, determination, and hugs. Also, at my first meeting, we were tasked to help build the whole conference for 2017. And I'm like, whoa, that's fast. I'm in. Tanya, with the great hair, had me at let's build something together. I'm a real sucker for building anything. So I took my passion and my hugs, and I gladly joined the troop. Now, Tanya's hair quickly connected me with this guy, Santucci. All right. And I had a quick conversation with Santucci. I'm kidding. You know what? He has a quick conversation with Santucci, but we talked, we vibed on his vision for the society, a strategy for plugging all the right people in all the right places to help propel us to becoming a premier society. My interest really hit the roof at that point because Scott described a big, wonderful, and maybe a little crazy vision. And I happen to be okay with crazy because it's the crazy ones who get shit done. And I'm also one of them. So what was it? What was his idea? Creating a society with principles and values that very closely aligned with my own. Possibly some improv in there as well. Things like taking risk, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, building something together out of nothing, creating a space for play. Ultimately, it meant that we are being intentional and mindful of the culture and climate that we build and advocate for. And I'm like, yes, and please. So fast forward to 2017, the SES conference, officially the second for the society, Richardson, Texas, as if I needed more reasons to love this community. It was magical. It felt like everyone there had a perma-grin and were high on some happiness drug. There was improv, hugging, slow motion hugging, fast hugging, a lion, a sportscaster doing play-by-plays. Oh, wait a minute, that was just Rush doing interviews, but doesn't he look like a sportscaster? And isn't sales a sport? Anyway, enough of that. Mario and Jen salsa danced. That clip is posted in community in case you don't believe me. Gerhard, the mindfulness guru, was floating around, setting the tone for an open and inclusive climate. Ori Brathman introduced the idea of serendipity, and boy, did he nail it. We were a bunch of people from different backgrounds, some focused on academics. There were practitioners, some lady who had everyone greeting each other like aliens, people connecting, creating bonds through a mutual passion and excitement for what was to come for SES. So back in Atlanta, I'm high on hugs. I nominated myself as the Atlanta chapter president, and Tanya, with the good hair, She got busy with the board. Local chapters were in full bloom, and international chapters started popping up everywhere. Word was spreading, and more people were joining the tribe. 2018, another conference in Denver. It started with a controversial battle of rock, paper, scissors as we embarked on a 250-person game of RPS until only 2 people remained, Bob Britton and Cheryl McCurdy Christensen. Who won? We don't like to talk about that. It's complicated. We have pictures. So we're in Denver, over 300 people. It's the launch of experience rooms. What kind of experiences are we talking about? I mean, we were in Denver, guys. It's legal. So yeah, no, these great experiences. We introduced all sorts of things. Vendor Neutral even unveiled the industry landscape for the first time. And we were all staring at, it was like all of us staring at one of those auto stereograms for hours. More hugging, more improv, a bunch of people looking to shake up the status quo, and more people to do it. Wait a minute. It's working. There is something to this theme of being mindful of the culture and we can do more together. Scott, it's working. Yet, the biggest thing, the one element that still stood out more than any other, this was family. And although it was growing, we all integrated the new and strived to keep our culture alive. Now, it's 2019 and momentum is strong, and I passed the president torch to the infamous Eric Starrett in Atlanta and got completely tangled up with new projects, and I felt like I was way down here, and all of the SES stuff was up here flying around above me, but it happens to all of us, right? And the best thing about SES is that we built this society with different bones, inclusiveness, mutual respect, we've got your back, and hugs. And even though I felt out of the circle, I was never so far off that I felt disconnected. Bonds, they mean something. So 2019 conference wasn't there, but I did catch the post buzz, the highlights, the future of sales enablement, revenue enablement. There was dancing, barbecues, speakers, and topics and experience rooms were more diverse than ever. And of course, hugging galore. And here we are, it's 2020. This might be the biggest pivot so far. Yet if any society is ready for a pivot, it's SES. We like our change, and we'd like to respond to that change together with passion, collaboration, determination, and wait for it, hugs. So welcome to the Sales Enablement Society Experience 2020. So happy you're all here. Speaking of propelling into another decade, I thought we could just reflect a little bit and look at this last year and pull some comedy out of that, pull some truth out of that. And we started a group in the community, and I like to call it COVID Made Me Do It, because come on, we all had a crazy idea or two during COVID. So, since we're virtual this year, I thought one way we can get to know each other is, I love my vulnerability. Be a little bit vulnerable and post something crazy that you did. I do have my own. I didn't have time to post it before now, but that'll give you something to go look for. Trust me, they're worth the wait. So, whether you purchase something that you were later like, oh, what in the world? Or, maybe you created, something in the kitchen that just didn't quite work out. But yeah, post it. That's one way we can all get to know each other and then leave replies for everybody on what that looks like. In fact, why don't we all go there now together? And if you haven't already posted, let's put some music on, take about, three or so minutes, go look at the community topic, COVID Made Me Do It. I think Juliana posted it, and let's post our own and look at some of the others and comment, and we'll come back here and mingle while that music is playing. But again, take like 3 minutes and we'll come back here. So, hey, how did it go? What did we see? I would love for you just to put into the chat observations, thoughts. I hope that you saw my monstrous moon pod that I thought would be a great idea because I was hurting so much from sitting on my computer all day. And I thought, what's the closest thing that I can get to like an actual chair? But a bed. So I ordered this thing and it's been the worst. It's basically a toy that my son jumps on. There's no sitting in that thing. Like you're just laying, you're not going to sit. So would love to hear maybe some of the other things that happened. I cooked a few unusual things too that did not turn out well. I'll post those later for your enjoyment. You're welcome. But yeah, I would love to just put your comments on other things that you did in the chat and get to know each other that way. And speaking of getting to know each other, if you go to the community or if you're a part of this conference and you're not in the community for some reason, please get in the community and create your profile. And, we can't hug the way we used to, and we can't, go out and have our dinners and meet and greet each other, but let's do it virtually. Let's find new people in the community and introduce ourselves. Maybe make your goal 3 people for the conference for today. 3 people for the whole conference. Come on. Yeah, that would be a daily goal. 3 people a day that you don't know, that you just introduce yourself to. And then next year when we all reunite, dare I say, in person, we still have these connections that are just so wonderful that we do every year. So please do that. I've got one last fun thing for us to do, but before that, I'm going to be doing a lot of thanking and recognizing and hyping sessions and things that are going on in SES throughout the conference. But I did want to just thank our conference team really quick to start us off. Dr. Rob Peterson, Kelly Griffith, Bill Ball, Siobhan Thatcher, Chris Kingman, Joel Laban, Mario Martinez, Mary Beth Hannaford, that's no surprise. She's always helping. Chip Day, Eric Sterrett, Natalie Bagule, I hope I pronounced that correct, Nicole O'Brien, Walter Pollard, Tamara Shink, Heather Cole, and Juliana Stancampiano. So thank you all for your help in being on the committee here for the conference. I'm sure you worked endless hours. And as we all know, everything's volunteer here, so we do it. We're fueled on passion and hugs, basically. All right, so the last thing we want to do is, I thought it'd be fun, maybe a conversation topic throughout the conference. When someone says, "Are you A, B, or C?" And you're like, "Well, I was a definite B." Let me tell you why. What are you talking about, Christy? I'm going to show you 3 pictures in order of a picture A, a picture B, and a picture C. And I want you to choose the one that most reflects your 2020, a metaphor for 2020. Whichever one you're just like, yeah, that's it, that's me. And then, like I said, use it for fun conversation throughout the rest of the conference. I can't see the answers right now. I thought I could see the chat, but if somebody wants to chat me and tell me where the majority of the answers are, I'll announce maybe the strongest picture, or the winner, I guess, if you would, that people chose more than the others. So first we'll start with, and again, which one depicts your 2020? So this is picture 1 or picture A. Let's let that sit for a minute. So many ways to interpret that. Oh, these are going really fast. Okay, picture A. Can we just sit for 2 seconds and really let people take this in? Is that you or is that your cat? I don't know. It can go both ways. All right, let's check out picture B. I can't get enough of this. All right. All right, and picture C. Yeah, I'm just having a good time. I just can't get over how pleased she is. All right, so let's go through them a little faster just one more time in the series of picture A, picture B, and picture C. Here's their fat cat.
And next, the kids, guys, the kids. It has been one hell of a ride. And then C. There she is in all her glory. All right, you guys pick, put in the chat. I'm going to check here real quick to see if I can see what the tally is here. All right, I guess we'll have to announce that maybe back at one of the future sessions. Would love to know which one of these depicts your 2020. So we are about to transition and go into some breakouts. And then later we have a keynote with Shane Jackson. And then later we have a panel with Juliana Stancampiano. So we will be ready for those and transition here over to the breakouts. You'll probably just see the welcome screen for a little while. But again, thank you so much for being here. I'm happy to be your guide and so delighted to be back after a crazy year for me and find my family here waiting with big virtual hugs. So we'll see you all back here soon, and I will be here throughout the journey.
When love comes in, ooh la la la. Love comes in, ooh la la la.
everyone, and welcome back to SES 2020 Experience. Pardon me. We are live, obviously. So how did the breakouts go? I'd love to have people comment, maybe their biggest takeaway, something they learned in their session, and share it with everybody, because that is the thing with breakouts. You can't go to all of them, but hopefully we have some playbacks that we can go back to. And speaking of, if you missed the intro, please go back and listen. There was a lot of shout outs and I was texting people afterwards, like, did you hear the shout out? They're like, oh no, I couldn't make it. So go back and listen. I want to make sure I said nice things about you. So we are getting ready for a great speaker and a session here that I think is applicable to everyone, because when I was reading it, I was like, yes, count me in. Sales training, sales content, sales tools. He's a master at all of them. Shane Jackson is the Senior Director, Analyst, Sales and Service Practice at Gartner. We've got to do something, Shane, about that title. It's just way too long. I mean, Master of All Sales Enablement. Like, I can help them. Why don't you do a survey at Gartner on whether or not your title is too long? Just kidding. So without further ado, again, like I said, I think Shane has kind of dipped his toe in all the waters, sales enablement. And, he really does serve our community. And personally, when you combine sales training, sales content, and sales tools, it is my world. And I'm sure that I share that same sentiment with many, many of you. So Shane, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. And I will turn it over now to Shane Jackson.
Thank you so much, Christy. It's great to be here. Hello to everyone in the Sales Enablement Society. I'm so excited to be here presenting to you. So I bet a lot of you can relate to a client that I spoke with last week. He's a sales enablement leader at a large manufacturing firm in Europe. And just like everyone else, they made this rapid shift to virtual in March. Virtual enablement, virtual selling. But because things shifted so quickly, it was somewhat of a sprint to make it work. Now, after sprinting for 7 months, he's tired. Business is okay, not great, like most others, but he's starting to wonder, did we do it right? Is there a better way? So we've learned a lot about sales enablement since the pandemic started, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about. So let's start the presentation. Now, before I go on, let me give you a proper introduction. I'm Shane, and I'm an analyst at Gartner, like Christy said, and my focus is sales enablement. Now, you may know Gartner for its extensive IT research and advice, but in 2018, we actually acquired another company focused on all the rest of the business functions. And that's where I work, as part of the Gartner for Sales Leaders practice. We support more than 700 business-to-business organizations around the world. So how did I get here? Well, I spent 24 years supporting and enabling sales teams in the technology space, from telemarketing to channel management to sales enablement. I did, like Chris said, I kind of did a lot. I saw a job posted at Gartner for sales enablement, and I was pretty psyched to get that first interview with the recruiter. I was going to make the best sales enablement program Gartner's ever seen. So I'm in this interview, and about 15 minutes in, the recruiter stops me and says, you know, you're interviewing for an analyst job, right? We're going to be creating research and sharing insights with sales enablement leaders and heads of sales, right? So I changed course, and well, here I am 18 months later. So that's how I got here. Now, let's talk about why you're here. So my goal for today is to show you what Gartner has researched and what we're hearing from sales organizations about today's state of sales enablement, both the challenges and the solutions. We're going to start with a quick update on the state of sales. That drives a lot of what we do, right? Then we're going to look at how sales enablement is helping to deliver what sellers need to succeed in today's virtual world, both the technologies, the skills, and the training. We all know virtual presentations like this shouldn't really be more than 15 or 20 minutes, right? least that's what we tell our clients when they come to us asking for advice about virtual sales kickoffs or training like this. But here we are with a 45-minute slot. So to make sure you get all the information you're hoping for, we're going to make this interactive. Yes, an interactive keynote. So we'll have a poll, and then not one, not two, but three, that's right, three Reddit-style Ask Me Anything sessions, where you can ask me questions about the sales enablement topic that we just covered. So let's get started. So we're going to start today by first discussing the state of sales. Any questions? So next slide. Next slide. Great. So this is basically the state of sales, right? We had what we were in March of 2020, and then here we are today working with our clients remotely. Of course, there's more to that than just not being able to meet with clients face to face. We've seen this big shift towards virtual selling, but to be honest, it's more like the pandemic has poured fuel on the fire of virtual selling. Many of the trends that we're seeing today were already in motion and have accelerated in recent months. Overall, buyers are expressing a preference for a rep-free buying experience. And that preference gets stronger the younger your buyers are. Almost half of the millennials surveyed said they'd opt for a rep-free buying experience if they could. But it's not just pressure from the buyers that's driving the shift towards virtual selling. We're seeing pressure come from within as well. Now, back in March, hardly any sales leaders thought they'd be permanently shifting outside sellers to virtual sales positions at the start of the pandemic. But here we are, when we did the survey again in July, midsummer, almost a third responded that they were considering it. Now, here's why. It considerably lowers the cost of sales, and with the right skills, sellers can be just about as effective. So one of my clients is in the process of remapping their accounts for their entire sales team. Now, they're North America focused, and they're going to have these sellers actually map to accounts less based on where they live and almost exclusively based on the seller's vertical expertise. In the new model, these sellers are going to travel occasionally, but the ratio of client to travel time is going to almost be the inverse of what it was. So they expect sellers to travel just maybe 20% of the time to meet with the clients in person. So now this leads us to the second trend we're seeing, and that's helping us to drive a shift to virtual selling. So B2B buyers are getting almost as much information from their own research, primarily from the vendor's website, that they're getting from the sales rep. So they're getting as much information from the sales rep as they're getting from the vendor's website. This graph shows that at almost every stage of the buying process, customers are getting the details they need to complete a buying job almost equally from both the seller and the vendor's website. Now, this is possible because we, sales enablement and marketing, are doing such a great job putting high quality information out there. Nearly 9 out of 10 buyers say that the information that they receive when they gather their research is of high quality. However, this leads to a separate set of challenges where they're overwhelmed with the information, or sometimes their information comes up with contradictory information. And sometimes, despite all the great information out there, they still struggle to make an informed trade-off between the two vendors or more vendors. Now that's where our sellers come in, right? Yes, that is, if we can get access to them. Despite all the heroics that sellers attribute to themselves for the deals that they win, there's a whole lot going on behind the scenes when the seller isn't around. So Gartner studied the amount of time buyers spend on activities in the buying journey. And you can see here about half the time was spent researching independently, both online and then also meeting with the buying group. Another 18% of the time was spent researching offline, doing things like trade shows, like back in the good old days, and one-off conversations. So only 17% of the customer's buying journey was spent meeting with vendors. And if there are 2 other vendors competing for that business, well, your seller is just getting 5% of the buying time. 95% of the time spent in the buying journey is not with your sellers. So to recap, we have some pretty big trends going on right now. We're seeing a permanent shift towards virtual selling. Customers find value from the information we post on our websites, and there's a lot going on with the buying process when the sellers aren't around. But what's next for sales? So Gartner recently published its Future of Sales report, and I want to share 3 big takeaways with you today. First is this move to digital sales interactions. So buyers will have a choice with how they interact with sellers, whether it's in person, digital, or blended channels, including bots. It's going to have the sales enablement to make sure our sellers have the new digital skills that they need to adapt. The next is this rise in data-driven selling. Reps will have more data and analytics at their fingertips to guide their steps in the sales process. We'll see an exponential increase in the number of touch points, interactions, and transactions suppliers have with customers. And we expect to see AI help with both seller and buyer enablement, with sales enablement and buyer enablement to capitalize on this increase in data. And finally, we think by 2025, half of all sales leaders will have shifted from being leaders of sellers to being leaders of selling. And that's where we see sales enablement shifting as well, with an expanded focus on buyer enablement. So that's where we are with the state of sales. Now, before we get to the state of sales enablement, I want to ask you something. So which of these big trends that we talked about are the most challenging for our sales teams today? So in the chat window, just type a 1, 2, or a 3. And then we'll cue the Jeopardy music while we wait. I'm actually gonna check my phone because Bill's gonna send me the results in a second. Jeopardy music, 1s, 2s, and 3s coming up. Okay, so back on those results. So now that we've talked about the state of sales, let's shift gears and talk about the state of sales enablement. So since I've been at Gartner, I've talked to countless sales and sales enablement leaders. It's part of my job. It's the part of my job that I enjoy. It's the part of my job that I enjoy most. But these 3 topics, virtual buying, virtual sales technology, and virtual training, are among the most requested client inquiry topics for the past few months. For each section, I'm actually going to highlight the challenges sellers and sales enablement leaders are facing. We're also going to offer some solutions for those challenges and then wrap up with 3 practical actions you can take. So we'll start with virtual buying. Oh, and just to recap on the results from the survey, looks like 3, which was getting access to customers, is the biggest challenge we're facing so far. So thank you for those that participated in the survey. So let's talk about what we can do to help sellers navigate in this digital world. We need to make sure they have the right competencies and skills to help them succeed and to get better traction with the buyers. And we, in Enablement, need to understand the virtual buying process to help sellers get it right. A lot of you may work with sellers who are chomping at the bit to get back to in-person meetings. They want to meet with clients face-to-face like they have for so many years. They say they're done with this whole remote selling thing. But we need to remember, we don't decide when it's time to start selling face-to-face again. That's a choice made by the buyers. But we also know that this whole virtual buying thing is working kind of well, right? Like I said before, it's cost-effective, our reps are making more calls, and we're seeing comparable results. However, it certainly has its own set of challenges. As sales enablement professionals, we've encountered some of the same challenges our sellers are seeing. Whether we're presenting or facilitating in class, virtual meetings are different. Not all bad, not all good, just a little bit different. We're dealing with short attention spans. The buyers have digital fatigue, They're in virtual meetings all day and get exhausted and quickly become disengaged when the digital world becomes too much. On top of that, the buyers are doing more research, and they're finding that there's a great amount of information out there that comes from trustworthy resources. And the third thing we're seeing is that it's getting harder to build consensus when the buying groups are dispersed remotely. The informal conversations that happened as the seller was being walked to the door after a presentation, well, when are those happening? When's that kind of post-meeting debrief happening? So we in Sales Enablement can help sellers align to this new, more digital buying journey. However, this requires a mindset and some new skills. Now, remember that slide where I showed you how buyers only spend 5% of the buying journey with their sellers? What happens when they get on a call with a customer who just can't take another Zoom meeting? Do your sellers have the emotional intelligence to shift gears on the fly, to choose the right technology or lack of technology, to suit the buyer whose finger is inching towards that red end call button? Have they learned how to use data to prepare for a call? Today's sellers need to understand that their ability to work effectively with data and with technology is something that's going to be expected for them to take the next step from a career perspective. That's the mindset required. Having digital dexterity also requires having the skills to deal with unclear and changing requirements and being able to master technologies so you can use them in any setting, from demos to a large group of buyers, or helping a prospect gather the right information needed to generate a proposal. Today's sellers require a mindset and require skills that were not on a radar, that were not on the radar of most sales teams at the start of the year. There's another kind of skill that today's most successful sellers are using to make the virtual buying process easier. It's called sense making. And in its essence, as the name implies, sellers with a skill can help buyers make sense of all the information they've come across in the research. Today's sellers need to be smart, not just about their solutions, but about the information that's available to the customer. One of the main jobs of sense making is connecting clients to the right information. In order to do that, sellers must have a strong command of the information landscape. In other words, sellers need to think like the customer. We need to understand what information customers will encounter as they research potential solutions to their challenges. Your sellers really need to know what information has been published by your company, what's been published about your company, what information have your competitors published recently, and then what's been published about your competitors. And then take a step back and put yourself in your seller's shoes. And if they Google the challenge that they're trying to solve with your product, what other alternatives are going to come up? What can your sellers learn from Googling, their challenge? With an information landscape, sellers are in a position to connect and curate information for the customer that will address their information challenges. It's also going to help them reduce the skepticism of sellers and ultimately inspire confidence in their decision. Now, understanding what information customers and prospects are consuming is just one part of the virtual buying process. And when we look at the virtual buying journey, we're going to take a look at what that means next. So today's sellers need to know how their buyers are buying. Guess what? It's different than it was before the pandemic. If you're finding customers are struggling to build consensus, you can figure out which steps in the virtual buying process are different from before. With all the ways 2020 has changed our businesses, if you haven't done so already, make it a priority to map out your customer's virtual buying journey. Gartner has an interview guide that can help with this process, and I've shared with many of my clients. Over the summer, one of my clients was using this tool and talked about how they found that a higher proportion of their opportunities were actually coming from webinars. It's a big shift that they didn't expect. They were surprised because corporate had only begun to accelerate its webinar scheduling. Turns out a couple of sellers had already taken a grassroots approach and had set up their own webinars, getting publicity they needed through their LinkedIn networks. The question to me was, how can we make these webinars more professional and consistent? Now, in addition to uncovering rogue seller-led webinars, taking a fresh look at your customer buying journey is going to likely uncover some steps that your company can take to make it easier for your customers to choose you as their vendor of choice. And don't be surprised if part of what you find is that they're trying to find other ways to buy what they need other than working with a sales rep. So now that we've covered some of the key areas of virtual buying, let's look at what you can do to help your sellers execute most effectively. First, help your sellers adapt to short attention spans and digital fatigue that comes with virtual buying. Perform a skills assessment to identify gaps with your most critical virtual buying skills. Next, make sellers more aware of the information that's overwhelming them. Make sellers more aware of the information that's overwhelming their buyers by mapping out the information landscape and keeping it updated. And then finally, solve the customer consensus struggle by mapping out the virtual buying journey to see what needs to change to accommodate for dispersed buying groups. Now, remember at the beginning, I asked for questions in chat. So this is your chance. We're going to tackle some of those questions, just like a Reddit Ask Me Anything. Sorry for the cheesy picture. This is number 1 of 3 cheesy pictures. So any questions related to sales enablement and virtual buying, send them my way. So question from Bob in chat. Virtualization of top of funnel activities makes sense, but can activities deeper in the funnel, like negotiations, be as effective? So I think you're asking like in light of virtual selling. And yes, definitely. I think, again, it takes a different skill set. And so if you're following a certain negotiation process, go back and look at, are we falling down at a certain part of the negotiation? Or if you're finding that there are some sellers that have mastered that are doing well, that aren't having as many problems with it, then go back and find what those sellers are doing differently from the others, and you can kind of compare. But I definitely believe that when it comes to negotiation can certainly happen virtually, and it can also happen obviously in person, but virtually it's just a little bit different. I wouldn't say better or worse. Bill, any other questions? Three blinking dots saying he's going to type something. Cindy, when you map the new buyer journey, do you interview top performers and clients? Actually, yeah, we do. We interview clients, we interview the top performers, and we also interview the sales team, the sales leaders, and kind of get their take on it, right? So we're kind of looking at all aspects of the buying process to make sure that we're taking it all into account. The more sources you have for this investigation of the buying journey, the better your data is going to be. I think we'll do one more question to keep on time. In challenger terms, are you saying that the big blue arrow is now at 100%? I'm not that familiar with that term, the big blue arrow. I'm going to pass on that one, and Phil, we'll connect offline, and I'll get you a better answer for that. Okay, so thank you guys for all the questions. Let's shift to our next topic on the state of sales enablement, which is sales technology. Now, when we talk sales technology and sales enablement, some might argue that this is an area that's more under the responsibility of sales ops or even IT. But regardless of where this responsibility sits in your organization, sales enablement usually has a seat at the table because it can guide the selection of tools based on what sellers need. Now, when I have conversations with clients about the sales tech they're using, I commonly hear 3 challenges. First, we hear that there's no consistency with the tools being used by different sales teams. It's funny, I was actually on a call with a client last week. They're in the medical device industry, and they're talking about how they're going to replace their face-to-face training with a blended learning approach. When I asked if they had an LMS, they said, of course we do. We have a Lego for the US, we have BrainShark for Germany, and we have Showpad for the rest of Europe. What a mess. But again, they have an LMS, so they can make do, right? but it's challenging. It kind of goes to the point of having too many sales tools being used inconsistently. Now, another challenge we see is sales teams trying to use those same sales tools they use for face-to-face meetings. While many will still argue that virtual selling is still selling, our sellers need updated and sometimes different tools. And finally, we're seeing a rise in awareness of the importance of asynchronous collaboration during the buying process. Now, overall, we need to make sure our sellers can support sales in a more digital way. The first step to do this is to take a look at the technology we're providing our sellers. Now, Gartner's 4E's framework can be used to rationalize a sales organization's technology and help streamline the process. Starting from the top right quadrant, we want to eliminate low-impact administrative tasks. By reducing the administrative burden that uses sales technology, we can help sellers focus on high-impact tasks that can help them move deals forward. Now, going clockwise, we want to make sure that we're also prioritizing the ease of navigating systems. Are there advanced search features that can be deployed? What about machine learning for next best recommendations? And now that we can bring sales experts into calls without the burden of travel, how many steps are required to find the right sales specialist to bring in to support a deal? In the evaluate quadrant, it's important to really dig into the new requests from sales leaders for additional functionality. Not all problems can be solved by throwing technology at it. If we examine the root cause of the request from multiple sources, we're better able to get the right better able to make the right technology decision. And finally, we want to make sure that we're embedding our sales-enabled technology solutions as close to the seller's workflow as possible. So I was recently talking to a client about a new LMS that they're going to deploy. They're looking at the different ways they could segment the information to make it easy for sellers. The one thing they hadn't considered was embedding the different learning assets into the CRM and other tools to bring the learning into the seller's daily tasks. Now that we've discussed how to rationalize the tools being used by sellers, let's focus on the technology they should be using for virtual selling. Starting at the top with online meetings, we're doing all that we can do to simulate the synchronous side of communications used in face-to-face meetings. While being on camera helps, there's a whole host of other technologies we can rely on to communicate with our sellers. And in the next part of this graphic, we're seeing some of our more advanced clients find ways to make sellers more effective and productive in the conversations. Client rates are up more than 20%, so they're rolling out sales consoles to display key client information to help with their phone and audio connections. They're also using high-quality headsets to improve call quality, and in some cases, implementing conversational intelligence with platforms like Chorus or Gong. Continuing around the circle at the bottom right is the digital content management platforms. In today's virtual world, we're seeing clients push for more with their platforms. They want content to be able to be accessed with just 3 clicks and within 10 seconds. Engagement analytics should be able to show us not only what content is consumed by sellers, but also what content is most valued by the buyers. Our clients are also investing in improving their internal technology to train their sellers. Sales team's most important training, whether it's new hire training, sales leadership workshops, or even sales kickoffs, have all been replaced with virtual alternatives. While this provides some advantages, much of the learning and coaching can now be done asynchronously. But to make it effective, we need to make sure that the training and coaching technology we put in place allows us to personalize, reinforce, and measure. The last piece of this graphic, digital sales rooms, is where we see clients embracing this digital buying process. Now, as I mentioned earlier, with such limited access to our buying journey, sales organizations are finding ways to leverage synchronous and asynchronous selling activities. One way is to build out a website that's more aligned to what sellers are presenting to clients in meetings. In many cases, sellers are transitioning from presenting with PowerPoint to presenting with their website, where they can show demos together with content and ROI calculators. And this ensures that the message is aligned, regardless of who from the vendor is presenting to the client. But the most interesting advancement and bringing synchronous and asynchronous buying together is what's called a digital sales room. Think of this as a microsite combined with a virtual meeting room and layered with engagement analytics. Buyers and sellers can meet synchronously and asynchronously to collaborate and engage as they work through a solution. It's essentially a meeting room they can return to every time they connect, and then a place they can refer to when referencing resources. It's like having a conference room where your whiteboard diagrams and your sticky notes that are up on the board and all the shared materials that you left out on the table are all still there from your previous meetings. But there's a way to track which prospects have consumed which materials. That's a digital sales room in a nutshell. Now that I've shared how sales organizations are raising the bar with their technology, let's take a look at a few recommended actions you can take. So think back to the 3 challenges we outlined at the start of this section. We discussed how inconsistent sales tools can be addressed with Gartner's 4 E's framework. So take steps to simplify your tech stack by getting rid of the tools that aren't delivering value. Next, make sure your technology is built for digital selling. And finally, assess your virtual selling technology to see what gaps exist from both synchronous and asynchronous selling perspectives. Okay, it's time for more Ask Me Anything questions and another cheesy photo of me. So any questions you have on the technology section we just discussed, ask away. Let me just pull up my phone. All right, so how important is a seller's virtual presence in a Zoom meeting? So that's a great question, Arthur. I like that one. So basically, I remember conversations with some of my clients back in the very beginning of March, or sorry, beginning of April, and they're talking about how their sellers who are so used to going out and being buddies with the clients, they really miss that interaction, and they really struggle to kind of have that presence on camera. So they have people showing up with baseball caps and their scruffy lockdown beards. And so how important is a virtual presence on Zoom? Super important, right? You need to make sure that you have a background that looks appropriate. If not, use a virtual background. Make sure you dress as if you would be dressing to meet with this client face to face. So I think that's a great question. And again, I'd make sure that you guys all have your sellers knowledgeable about what they should be looking like when they go on a Zoom call. So question from Gail. Our sellers are saying that in spite of firing up their cameras, the buyers are not reciprocating. That's okay. But there's some things you can do, just little things. So when you're emailing them, you can drop a line like, hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you. I'll have my camera on. You're not making them turn their camera on, just kind of saying, hey, I'll be on camera. I think as the pandemic has worn on, people are getting more and more comfortable with being on camera. So I think just keep at it. Drop hints. Don't make them obviously go on camera, but if the client isn't on camera, have your seller stay on camera. That's the best path. I think that's all the questions we have for now. Let's move on to a third leg of the sales enablement stool. So something that's at the core of every sales enablement team that I've met with, and that's training, or really virtual training since it's 2020. So I saved this for last because it's without virtual training, you really can't grow virtual skills and competencies that we discussed earlier. And the training is necessary to help sellers adapt the new technologies that we just adopted. So let's take a look at where companies are challenged most with the sales team's virtual training today. With the shift from mostly in-person training to full engagement of remote learning, we've learned some lessons along the way. But the challenges that we face in the meantime can be summed up here. Shifting from instructor-led training to virtual is not a simple copy and paste. We know that group learning and collaboration are challenging when the class is fully remote. And just like our buyers, it's more challenging to engage your audience virtually, and extra steps are required to drive retention. Now, virtual training is something that many of us have done for a while. It was part of an overall training portfolio. But we now need to realize that this face-to-face training option may not be an option in the foreseeable future, so we need to get better at it. We can start by looking at the key design elements that have proven to be effective with virtual training. In this chart, you can see how we've mapped different face-to-face activities to virtual training design recommendations. The key is to focus instructor-led training for situations where sellers benefit most from group work, learning from others' experiences, sharing best practices, or learning skills that require collaboration and teamwork. ILT is also the perfect choice when sellers need in-the-moment expert advice and coaching, like with observation or interactions, or even feedback on sales skill role-playing. But remember, it doesn't all need to be synchronous. With virtual and blended learning, we can now pick and choose which activities should be done together and at the same time, and which ones can be leveraged as pre-work, practice, and post-work follow-up. When converting face-to-face training to virtual learning, you really need to remap the learning objectives and think through the best methodology for each of the teaching points. In many cases, this is about reorienting our instructors to use all the tools and resources they have at their disposal. And luckily, we have lots of different tools we can call on to help our sellers learn. Many of these tools are self-paced. They're self-paced tools that our sales trainers can pull from when it comes to sharing information. We need to remember too that not every person learns effectively from the same modality. Some people absorb information best from reading materials. Others love podcasts and watching videos. So having a wide range of delivery tools makes sure that we can reach all of our sellers. For example, offering a video and a script for that video so sellers who learn best by reading can benefit as well. Then you can follow that up with a knowledge assessment and possibly a gamified learning activity for reinforcement. But we also know that some modalities are best suited for different types of learning. The trick is finding the right modalities for what you're trying to teach and then considering other ways it can be shared. Of course, this isn't new to 2020, but what is new is the importance of getting virtual training right. Before, we had face-to-face training for the big, most important events. Now that virtual training is pretty much the only option we have, we need to make sure that we're using the right training delivery option to address the right training need. In most cases, those big training initiatives will benefit most from a blended learning approach. But it's all for naught if what we're teaching doesn't stick. That's where machine learning and reinforcement come in. Analytics built into virtual learning technology helps sales-enabled leaders track the progress of sellers as they move through the training. Tracking is visualized at an individual and team level based on sellers' roles within the organization. Then this tracking enables individuals to see where they need to improve and how they're progressing. The data then gets rolled up to sales managers and leaders for a team and organizational view. This higher level view allows post-training reinforcement to be customized based on a seller's gaps, providing them with quizzes that can detect knowledge loss and recommend additional training as a result. Virtual training has really taken a prominent and more permanent role in sales enablement. Fortunately, the tools we have at our disposal can ensure it can be just as effective as in-person learning. Now let's take a look at what actions you can take so your sellers can reap all the benefits from virtual training. So these recommendations really come down to recognizing that your sellers will not learn as effectively if we're not redesigning our ILT courses almost from scratch to fit a more scalable virtual model. Next, make it a goal to expand your learning tools arsenal with the new modality of sharing information. Finally, improve retention by using machine learning to track progress and customize reinforcement. Okay, now it's time for one last Ask Me Anything question round and the final cheesy photo of me. So what questions do we have around virtual training? I'm going to check my phone here. All right, so Sarah had a question about there's lots of tools and applications out there for sales enablement, LMSs, CMSs. What's the best way to narrow down a large pool of purchase possibilities? So I'm going to do a shameless plug here. Gartner has a magic quadrant for our clients. That's one way to do it. But obviously, the other way to do it is to talk to your peers in the sales enablement society. They've got great insights. You can also check out Gartner's peer insights. I believe it's a public access website, so you should be able to go and check that out. And then third is just kind of meeting with the different vendors and trying to assess. And so have a consistent scenario that you want them to take you through, so you can say, you're not just going to sit through their demo, their canned demo. You can kind of say, I want a demo that shows me A, B, C, D, and E, and they can have all of them go through the same tasks with that demo. So you'd be looking at vendor 1, vendor 2, vendor 3, have them all follow a consistent process showing you how to do certain tasks. That's one way to do that. Another one. So does Gartner have a point of view on the end-to-end sales tech stack needed? Not just enablement tools, but the lead tools, the entire stack to support end-to-end. We do. I'm sure we do. I'm not the most, I don't spend the bulk of my time studying sales technology, so I'm not the right person to answer that question, but it's a great question. Fiona Simpson, how do we tackle the intangible learning that happens for new hires they would get in the office? Like I can't just pop over to someone's desk, ask a question, or can't get advice over lunch. So that's a great question from Fiona. One of the big parts of new hire training is exposure to all the people that you work with. And while you can't just, like you said, walk over to someone's desk and ask a question, you can have little team chats set up. So we use Teams at Gartner, but there's whatever chat tool you use, you can set up in a way to capitalize on people that the sellers should be exposed to when they first come on board. It could be just their peers, could be their peers and maybe a mentor. So that's one way to do it. Second is setting up kind of more like relationship building conference calls where they're meeting with a peer, they're meeting with a mentor, and they're learning the things that they need to know just kind of on a much more informal basis. And then the third piece is making sure that you're instilling the culture of the new hire experience into the sellers when you're doing that. So I can think of new hire experiences in my career, and a big part of that sales new hire process was exposing you to the culture of the organization, the culture of the company, and making sure that the sellers walk away with a lot of that. So in terms of the getting that kind of informal network of information going, I think those are some great ways to do that. Fiona, thank you for the question. Give it one more second, see if there's any other questions coming in. Looks like there's one more. Cindy Stuckey, what are the top topics you're seeing people with teaching and virtual training? So that's a great question. So some of the topics are around, so we're going to assume that everyone has their virtual presence down already, so that they already know how to project themselves virtually. They know how to present virtually. But the skills that people are building out now are skills around sense making. They're going back and reinforcing the sales methodology that they have, because a lot of times the sales methodology that they've chosen may have some new tweaks to it. They're also going out and trying to uncover the changes that are being put in place when they use certain materials. So how do you present those materials? What's the new demo protocol? How do we present our proposals? And on top of that, making sure that they understand that these meetings are no longer the 60-minute, full on, let's go through a ton of information. They're usually 30 minutes, and they're going to be kind of more compressed and have a much more detailed agenda to make sure they cover all the right topics. So thank you everyone for your questions, some great thoughts and great ideas. So I'd like to leave you with just one last slide, wrapping up what we've talked about for the last 45 minutes or so. So the future of sales is going to take us to a dramatically different place, with more and more sales interactions occurring digitally. We need to get these three things right: virtual buying, virtual sales technology, and virtual training. With virtual buying, we need to help sellers develop new skills they need to adopt this new digital buying journey. We also need to streamline the seller's technology staff to arm them with the tools they need to support virtual buyers. And finally, we need to leverage blended learning and machine learning to achieve the same results as in-person training. Thank you all for your time today. I really appreciate all that you did to keep this session interactive. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
I totally get it. I mean, you got to have the right etiquette. You have to be mindful of your backgrounds. Great talk. Totally get it. We're all living in this virtual space. Those were great tips. And if you didn't get your questions answered, keep them coming. And hopefully Shane will be able to get to some of those questions that we weren't able, because there was a bunch of questions coming in and I was like, poor guy, he's not going to know where to start. So Shane, that was really awesome. And I'm about to kick it over to Juliana Stancampiano. She is an SES board. She's on the SES board of directors, president and CEO of Oxygen. And by the way, probably the only person I know who did manage to not gain any weight COVID. Yeah, she looks fantastic. And everyone else does too. But, you know, I put on a couple of COVID pounds and you may be with me, but Juliana is not. So with that, Juliana, you have a great session here and some great panel members. I'm going to throw it back to you and let's get ready for this next session.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christy. I didn't know if I was going to be able to come out of that with a straight face, so I appreciate it. I am looking forward to this next panel that we have, and I'm excited to both share with people that are new to SES, and those that have been around aren't going to be super surprised, but we took it upon ourselves to do something different. And it's always a test to see how things go, and we use you all sometimes to see how things go and get feedback. But one of the things that we've heard, and I've been hearing in the breakout sessions, is about needing to understand business and the state of business and where we're headed and what our leaders are thinking, and how are they making plans out of through this pandemic and out of this pandemic and beyond it. And so I'm excited for us to be able to have here today a number of people that are leading businesses, those that are doing the research and the analysis, just like Shane Jackson is at Gartner, as well as one of our academic partners who is trying to teach to the new sellers that are coming out and into the world that we're in. So in typical SES fashion, we'll see how things go. I think it's going to be a lively conversation, and we're going to have Q&A as well, similar to what Shane just did with Bill Ball. So if you have questions as we go through, please post them in the chat. Bill's going to be texting me, and we're going to be grabbing those as we go through. We're going to go through 3 rounds of questions that we've prepared, and then the rest of the time is up to our community to be able to learn and understand from the people that we have in front of us. So I want to introduce the first person on my list, which is Doug Winter. He is the co-founder and CEO of Seismic. Many of you probably know him. He is a veteran entrepreneur, and he's been the co-founder of other companies. To when I said it, I will tell you that I tripped over all of the words. So if you want to see the other companies, head out to his LinkedIn bio, because I'm not going to say them, I decided. But he's also served as the COO and general manager of EMC Document Sciences, which many of us have probably heard of. until he started Seismic in 2010. There's a lot that we can learn from those that are in our space, but leading businesses, and Doug's businesses is a unicorn in the space. So he's gone from starting all the way up to that status that many entrepreneurs are looking for, which is fantastic. So Doug, welcome. And I have to say, on his schooling that I have on his introduction, he is a Virginia Tech and a Hokie, and I make fun of him on that in all of our calls. You can ask later maybe why. But Doug, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Terrific. So the next person up is David Keane. As you'll notice when he starts talking, he is not from the United States. He is from Australia, but he does live in the US and chose the very lovely place of Boston that has amazing winters and weather to reside. He's been in and around the tech and entrepreneurial markets for over 20 years, working with large enterprise clients, smaller customers, and many consumer customers as well. So he loves bringing that technology and business together to solve challenges for their clients. So David, welcome to the panel.
Thank you so much, Juliana. And yeah, I'll try and keep that accent under control. I am working on the Boston accent, so we'll see how that goes today.
Terrific. And as you guys have probably noticed, these are our two platinum sponsors for the event. So many thanks to both of you for sponsoring at such a level for the Sales Enablement Society. It's a bunch of volunteers and blood, sweat, and tears that are together trying to put together as much as we can from a content perspective that's going to help elevate the role of sales enablement. And this is just one of the examples of the community coming together to do that. Great. So next up is Peter Ostro. Peter is the VP and Principal Analyst covering sales enablement for Forrester/Sirius Decisions. Peter is also part of the board of directors for the SES. So he's helping to drive the way forward and the vision forward for our group here. So Peter, welcome.
Thanks very much. And like David, I live in the Boston area. And like David, I don't sound like a Bostonian.
People go there and they come from all over. This is what I've learned. I'm one of those. So welcome, Peter. And then the next person, last person on our panel is Joel Lebon. He also doesn't come from our country. So this is great. We have a great global audience, but does live in the United States. Joel's the marketing and sales professor at Johns Hopkins University and the executive director of Science of Digital Business Development Initiative. He's also the first professor using live sales enablement technologies in graduate business education. So that is very cool and very great that our academic environment and professors are embracing what we do and using it in their own space. And as well, Joel sits on the board of advisors for the SES and has for a number of years. So Joel, we are happy to have you.
Thank you, Juliana. Glad to be here too with everyone from across the globe.
Yeah, terrific. I love all the accents we'll have. And so we're going to go ahead and dive into round one, and hopefully everybody can see all of us. We tried to do some maneuvering so that we could see all of our faces at one time. You can see the reactions that we get, which I always find kind of interesting when you're watching these things. So round one, and we're going to go in the same order that we did to start so that we don't trip over one another. So Doug, I want you to start out with the first question is going to go to both of the CEOs, and we luckily don't have the same questions for everybody because we have different backgrounds, obviously. But Doug, what is the most surprising thing that you've seen due to the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, what a transition for all of us, right? I remember clearly having our board meeting the first week in March. We met on Wednesday. We approved our plan for the year. We approved a couple of strategic initiatives that we were gonna move on. And then I remember on Friday calling up the team, and starting a small fire, symbolically burning our plan and saying, well, I guess we're back to the drawing boards. All that happened within a week. Fortunately, we were a very virtual business to start with. We have 14 different offices around the globe, so we're used to not working all in the same place. So that part of the transition wasn't too difficult for us, but we all went, I think, like all of us, went through a replanning process. What does this mean? What's going to happen? Let's be conservative. Let's be safe. And we went through that activity. We felt, I think, intrinsically that sales enablement and specifically what Seismic does was going to be, in a lot of ways, further accelerated by this new reality. But we also knew many of our customers were going to be under a tremendous amount of stress, and so we wanted to be smart and conservative about it. It's played out, largely the way we thought that it might, in terms of seeing, sort of across the board impacts and in how people are doing work. Specifically, I think we've seen, more than a doubling of usage on our platform almost overnight. Between March and April, we saw, almost 100% in all the different metrics. We track lots of different metrics in the product, as you can imagine. And, almost immediately, everything doubled as people were really being forced to move much more aggressively down the path of digital transformation that they were probably already on. I remember one particular customer that I met with, and, I was meeting with him every couple of weeks, and he kind of went dark. He missed a couple of meetings, and then he showed back up and he said, "I'm sorry." He goes, "I'm in charge of our IT infrastructure, and I was supposed to," we were about a month away from doing a 1-week test of having, one small part of our business, about 1,000 people, work from home for a week. And I found out that I suddenly had to have the entire workforce working from home on Monday. So I've been a little bit distracted. But we've seen a lot of impact in a couple areas. I think, communications is one, where people are using technology to communicate with their sales teams more than they did before, and being able to leverage technology to be able to share developments, share the new rules of the road, if you will, new sales processes that were being rolled out, new packages and bundles that were being very quickly assembled to support promotions that they were doing. We saw a lot in the sort of collaboration area as well, part of the product, where people needed to work together on teams and they couldn't do that face to face anymore. So they were doing it remotely and in asynchronous ways. And we saw people leaning on the data infrastructure more heavily because they were no longer able to necessarily sit and manage their sales teams the way they had been historically. And they needed dashboards that they could customize and review that would sort of tell them, or their teams doing the right things, were they sharing the content the way they expected and following up with the cadence that was expected and those kinds of things. So those are some of the big, 3 big areas that we saw impact in. We've certainly seen customer adoption go up, but we've also had customers who are, happy, but laid off a half of their sales team. So I would say across industries, and it's been a wide range of impact in the customer base, but in general, a pretty significant acceleration down the digital transformation and digital selling road that many of these companies were already on.
Yeah, that's great. Seems like that tracks to a lot of the data that Shane just presented as well. So David, I'm curious to get your perspective of what you saw as well.
Well, certainly what's not surprising, I think, to echo Doug's remarks, of course, is that, the pandemic has had a pretty big impact. I think it's also important to remember that the impact of the pandemic on human beings, of course, has been terrible. And I want to say certainly thoughts and prayers go out to everybody that's been impacted personally by this terrible situation. And yeah, I think absolutely it's accelerated some of those operational trends that were happening and sort of been happening for years. The idea of moving to a mobile and remote workforce is something that has been on the roadmap of many organizations for a while. And certainly that impacted Big Tin Can as well, and the need to make sure our teams were effective and efficient working from home. I think what is interesting though is what we've seen happen very much because of the pandemic just is that it's now more and more about the need for humans that are working with customers to be even more skilled and knowledgeable than ever before. And that's really to keep up with all you folks out there watching this stream in the sales enablement community. You're using digital tools more than ever before, and the customers of your products are engaged using digital tools more than ever before. And that means that your teams have to be more skilled and more informed and more prepared than ever before. I think that's really obviously important when it comes to making kind of the right financial decisions. I think as well as that, something else we've found in the pandemic is that our customers have been telling us that more than ever before, they need their software platforms, their tools to really adjust and adapt to the way they work, to really help their remote teams in this new world to stay in touch with the company vision, values, culture, and of course the products they sell when they're physically distant. I think it's become pretty clear in the pandemic that, the traditional SaaS approach of one product fits all probably doesn't drive and doesn't get us the kind of engagement and adoption we need in the field to be successful. Something else I saw happen, which I thought was interesting to share today, is that if you think about, we're certainly hearing, and I'd like to hear if you are as well, from the office of the CFO and the CIO at many of our customers, a phrase that, again, the community out there may be hearing, which is vendor consolidation. And this vendor consolidation is being pursued for both functional benefits. So the idea that a single vendor can kind of integrate better and provide better data flows, making it easier for users and admins. But also, certainly, we're hearing the need for cost benefit through vendor consolidation too. And certainly the pandemic is definitely driving that need. And probably that cost reduction drive is here to stay. One thing I think that probably everybody on this panel would agree, though, is that for all of the businesses in this new, digital and mobile world, you have to be able to adapt. If you can't adapt, you're not going to be as successful as you think. I think being fastest and smartest and ready to adapt is going to be critical to help you come out strong.
Yeah, that's great. I think, we've noticed across the platform and all the chatter across the community that a lot of what you're saying we're going through, right? And there's lots of questions about has anybody used this or have you done this? The SKOs are a big topic, the going virtual. Now it's like the next iteration. How do you get better, right? Because we were all thrown into it really fast. And I think that that's interesting on the consolidation as well. It's something that we've been seeing from an Oxygen perspective as well across the clients that we have doing the same thing. Feels a little bit 2008 reminiscent, but has different flavors to it for certain. That's great.
That's right.
All right, Peter, what are you seeing across the market and specifically for sales enablement with the impact of COVID?
Yeah, Juliana, I'll echo what David and Doug were talking about, which is this level of need of adaptability is something that most B2B sellers, most of us, have never encountered before. And if most of us know one thing, it's that good B2B sellers are creatures of habit. They figure out what works for them and they stick to it, and sometimes are a little more resistant to change than we like. And this year has been nothing but change. So I think both of the gentlemen made the right point about the dramatic need for enablement to step up and be part of the answers and part of the solutions. We've probably seen three main trends around the market that I would probably identify as sort of 30,000 foot trends. The first trend is really about some flaws in upstream, downstream decision making inside organizations that this pandemic and the need to go so virtual have revealed as weaknesses in a lot of organizations. Enablement is a somewhat of a downstream function. We rely in enablement on the upstream executives, the C-blank-O, the CMO, the CRO, the CSO, CHRO, to make some decisions about what the sales motions are going to be for our team. They are going to decide what percentage of our motions are going to be inside and field and overlay and new business and hunter and farmer. And when those strategic decisions are made, then we in enablement get to make sure that all the reps are, to David's point, very competent at the things they need to be good at. Are they skilled at what they need to be skilled at? Do they know what they need to know? And do they have all of the process necessities well in hand? Well, a lot of changes were made very, very quickly, in the middle of March, and a lot of companies have dramatically changed what they sell, to whom they sell, how they sell. And to be honest, a lot of our enablement customers were caught flat-footed by some downstream pushes of, hey, by the way, you got to change all your people now, yesterday, without a recognition of what good looks like for each of those positions that they're supporting, each of the sales personas that they're supporting has changed. And so we've been really busy this year with helping folks understand how do we take a step back and look at what good looks like for these new roles? And more importantly, what does good look like for the next normal, for these roles in 21, 22 and beyond? And to use those competency baselines to figure out how to support their sellers as well as possible. So that's the first item, is this communication up and downstream has been flawed, and we certainly hope that all of us are learning to have some sort of a mental or actual playbook for the next time some dramatic change happens. Hopefully not this type of change, but some kind of change. M&A, legislation, we need to be better at change management. The second is that it's really crystallized, I think, in the minds of a lot of enablement practitioners that their own people planning has been somewhat reactive. We tend to focus on the entire sales talent life cycle, from the hiring to the onboarding to the long-term growth and development of sales talent. A lot of organizations kind of don't pay attention to that first part of it because HR and talent acquisition are responsible for the hiring, and we'll grab a hold of them after the orientation is done and we'll mold them into what we think is best. But the people planning needs to be different in the next normal because it's going to require different skills, different competencies, different kinds of flexibilities in whatever hybrid world or adjusted world we live in, or to the first point, whatever big changes come through down the road. So the people planning is starting to become a little bit more something that the sales enablement or revenue enablement thinking is paying attention to. And then finally, none of this stuff happens really without the contributions of and the support from the first line managers and the field coaches and the overlays, the folks who are both our parents in our hierarchy, but also our uncles and our aunties, right? The folks who are responsible for being subject matter experts, for making sure we're aware of what we need to be aware of. The first line manager role in a lot of B2B enterprises is mostly populated with people who sold a lot of stuff, and we just kicked them upstairs. My favorite example is here in Boston. We had the best baseball hitter of all time, Ted Williams, and he is universally known to have been just literally, the best pure physical hitter of a baseball in the entire sport. We have the World Series go on. They have Mookie Betts, all this stuff. We can talk about that later on. But he actually then made the list of the 10 worst managers ever because his competency set for being a great hitter did not translate to those of being a manager. So that's really the third trend we've seen that has been laid bare by the pandemic, Juliana, is, wow, our managers just sold a lot of stuff. That's why they're managers. But are they in a position to help folks deal with having to help the kids do calculus homework during the sales call? Are they competent at understanding how to support some of the needs of their sellers that aren't just, let me look at your pipeline and help you close your deals? So that role is evolving, and I think it's been laid bare by the sudden change and dramatic change that we've all seen this year.
Yeah, so I think that's fascinating because I feel like that point on the managers and people that have been elevated because they were good sellers. It feels like a talk track that's been around for a long time. And I'm wondering if the pandemic just really shone a spotlight on it, right? And made it something that we have to actually face and do something about versus it was able to get along prior to. So that's fascinating. Terrific. So this is also a great segue into where Joel's at and what he's doing. So Joel, from the academic view, what are you doing differently this fall in your curriculum? Let's not talk tech first. Let's talk curriculum and the conversations about what is needed now for sellers to be successful.
Yes, very important question, Juliana. I think we need to redefine academia. Where are college campuses today? So that's a big problem. I think COVID-19 is certainly a stress test for many ecosystems. And of course, healthcare, the economy, organizations, and education, but also how much resilience you can build into those systems. And like Peter mentioned, when we build ecosystem, we build habits, and then we become, our own creator of our own habits. But suddenly, when things are totally different, with no anticipation, no preparation for such a pandemic, the whole ecosystem is at risk. And I have to say that academia, higher education was not ready. Although we had before online teaching, but academia was not ready because students were not ready. The students are also looking for some kind of learning experience on the campus with their peers. And yes, unlike the buyers who don't want to see and connect with sellers early on in the buying process, students, they want to connect with their professors, with their peers, with their institutions. And if you have children going to college right now, it's hard. It's hard to go to college today. It's hard to be 20 in 2020. And I have a daughter who just turned 20 last week. And it's hard. It's so different. So I'd like to say that we are doing different things at the institution level, but also I'm doing different things at the personal level. And this is interesting, in fact, as a consequence of all of this. First, we share more and more best practice across departments. Usually in academia, you're going to have, let's say, marketing, and inside marketing, sales. We're fighting against that, but this is how it is. And then you're going to have supply chain, you're going to have management, you're going to have finance, accounting. We collaborate much more. And we collaborate a lot within the faculty body, especially to understand how we all engage differently our students. So we share best practice across departments more. And usually academia functions in terms of silos. So this is interesting. We also go from a push mode to a pull mode. I mean, remember your professors, your education used to be kind of a push mode kind of interaction. Instruction is going from top down, from the instructor to the student. But today we move to a pull mode where we pay more and more attention to the students' experience, needs. And the experience is virtual, and we have to redefine that. So this is something very, very interesting and very important. But also something which I think it's also important in organizations, especially today, we have to recognize, because the very ecosystem was put at risk and is no more efficient. We have to rebuild and change our habits, like Peter said, but we have to recognize that perfection is no panacea, and it's okay to fail on your way to learn. So we have to become more flexible in our education to let the student fail more often, because they are by themselves. Personally, now in my curriculum, in my course, I used to use a lot of technology to teach, to engage, and to teach sales. I mean, you have to, right? This is very important. But even more today, and really accepting that technology is a critical supplement to sales learning, and we might say that technology might save sales relationship and sales education. Thanks to the technology. Would have said that like a year ago, but technology is really helpful. And in academia, we have the learning management system platforms such as Blackboard, for example. But it's not a way to bring people together. So I teach all my classes on Salesforce. I run all my courses on Salesforce. And I tell my student, Blackboard is your briefcase, Salesforce is your campus. I have, for example, last semester, I had 200 students, different classes, did everything on Salesforce, managed all the class, the groups, all the assignments, dashboards. This is great, actually, to manage learning. It's very close to what sales enablement is about. So it's about education enablement. Regarding the skills to be successful, you said in sales, it made me think about, what are the skills which are going to be important for the future of work, especially in sales. But it depends for the kind of customers you are dealing with. And what I'm seeing is great collaboration now better collaboration between marketing and sales, because segmentation matters even more. We have to prioritize customers. We have to find the best customers. We have to engage the best customers. We have to do more research for the customers. We have to re-engage the customer base. We have to concentrate maybe on fewer leads, and we have maybe to deal with them differently. So marketing and sales, they have to collaborate. So I teach a lot of marketing in my sales class and a lot of sales in my marketing class. Trying to nurture collaboration early on in the classroom. But in terms of skills, so it's important to separate the types of skills we are talking about, hard skills and soft skills. So the soft skills, people-based skills, digital communication skills, how to network digitally. I mean, we know in sales, it's very important to build rapport, right? No, how do you build rapport digitally? How do you build trust? How do you create trust? Very important. Also in sales, listen, don't tell, but how to listen digitally.
Mm-hmm.
How to have a strategy of social listening to really understand your customers. This is critical, especially today. And also time management, because of what's going on in this world, time management for managing multiple stakeholders and multiple tasks. Now, usually in sales, we used to think that the soft skills are maybe a little bit more important than the hard skills. Well, I think this might change because the hard skills, the technical based skills related to some procedures are becoming very important. So this is what I implement in my class, ability to learn and leverage multiple technologies. I have a sales stack I use in the class, and they have to leverage all of that. And I use sales enablement platform. Data analytics, management and interpretation of data. This is critical because data is available, but also manufacture the sales cadence with preparation and discipline. Follow the process, trust the process, build the process, and not just rely on relationship, because now it's digital. And one last thing I'd like to say, I'd like to teach that as well, is really some kind of personal resilience through collective resilience. This is very important. And I have also noticed, I don't know if you noticed that in your different roles, but we really have to flip the camera to actually not be on the customer's shoes, but in the customer's camera. And there is something which is very interesting, or not, but about 50% of American adults have auditory issues. So when we go Zoom and we speak like that, 50% of the audience may be missing what you are talking about and not retaining information. This is a problem when you teach and also when you interact with the customers. So flip the camera is also very important to understand who is on the other side of the camera. So
yeah, that's terrific. I'm hoping our audience isn't tuning out of 50% of what we say right now, but you never know, right? That's where the world we're in, and listening digitally. I think that's interesting. Listening's always been big, but digitally, I think we all know that we have things flying in and flying at us and barking behind us, or kids right now, while we're home. So definitely, there's a lot of challenges on our headspace. I'm going to quickly pivot us into 2021, because I think we're all ready to go there and start talking about it. So Doug, let's start out with what are the conversations like about strategic planning as we know, the one thing that we heard early on is the pandemic has an end, right? It won't be here forever. It's different than a recession. And so what are you guys doing from a 2021 perspective and planning going forward?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think probably pertinent for just about everybody here. I think Peter called out the need to stay nimble, and I think that's really, really important. There's just so much unknown. I think many of us across the globe were slow to recognize just how long this thing could go, and I think are now settling into the reality that we've got a pretty long slog ahead of us still. And I think the balance that we're trying to figure out is, how do you balance the conservatism that you feel like you should have in light of the what's happening to your customers. If you're, regardless of how your business is doing, your customers are guaranteed to be impacted, and especially when they cross industries the way that ours do, that you will find some that are doing well, and you'll find others that are, fighting to stay alive. So how do you balance the conservative there with also, there's real opportunity. There are opportunities that we see all around us, and I know our customers probably do the same, that are being, brought forward because of the impact of COVID, because of the acceleration of kind of the digital transformation that's happening. And, technology can help you as a leader move a lot faster. And so, we try to put ourselves in that space, flip the camera, as Joel said. We try to flip the camera and think about our customers and, how our technology can help them move faster to communicate the changes that they want to make, whether it's a new sales process that they want to roll out, or new products that they want to bring to market, or new solutions and bundles that they're creating, being able to move faster as a leader, requires technology to help you. And so, we're trying to understand that and invest in initiatives that we think are going to help our customers be able to leverage technology that way. It's pretty clear live meetings aren't coming back anytime soon, maybe never, at least the way that we used to know them as sort of the cornerstone for how you do business. And I think you would be crazy at this point in time if you weren't really thinking about how to optimize the way you sell to that reality and optimize it in your processes and playbooks for the reality of the fact that the meetings are going to be face-to-face. And what does that mean? It means, listeners that are paying a little bit less attention than they might be if they were in the room. It means, that you need to be more asynchronous in the way you deliver information. You want to make sure that they can digest the information offline when you're not there. You want to create content that's more engaging, it's more interactive, it's more self-explanatory. And super important, it must be personalized and on target. You don't want to waste a lot of time with them with information that they may already know. You need to really get to the questions that they're asking and answer those things as quickly as possible. I think that, again, a trend that was already in flight, but is being accelerated from what I see is around more data-driven decision-making. People, decisions of who's performing and who's not, what's working and what's not, content in our world, content decisions about what's effective and what's not. All of those things just need to be done based on data when there's less personal face-to-face exposure to all those conversations and all the impacts that are happening there. And then I think finally, people are being forced to make really hard decisions. And, that's always the case, that resources are limited. But in an environment where many budgets are being constrained, contracted even fairly significantly, companies are being forced to evaluate what are the technologies, what are the workflows, who are the people that are really going to be critical for their success going forward. And really trying to make sure that you're optimizing the organization, optimizing all the processes and workflows that you have. I think that those types of decisions, are just, you may have been able to ignore them in the past and put it off for a quarter or 2 quarters. And now you're being, really forced to deal with it quickly, make the decision, live with the results of that decision that you made, and move fast into the execution mode. So I think, in summary, I guess, stay nimble, be bold, don't be stupid, but be bold, and, make the bets that you're going to make them, all in, and but be ever responsive and aware of what's happening around you in the world, where you never know what's going to happen, like next Wednesday, for example.
Yeah, completely. We won't go there, but David, I'll let you go ahead and jump in on that.
Well, look, first of all, I think for all of us, we realize that these trends that Doug was talking about, digitization, mobility, remote working, I know we think that we're already there with them, and maybe some leading organizations are, but we believe there's a lot of work to go on in 2021 and maybe even beyond, as organizations really continue to embrace those trends and make them part of everything they do. They make them core to their operation. And really that's just due to digital buyer. The digital buyer is here, and they are going to be here forever. And that's going to lead to increased competitiveness in almost all markets. From what we see, it doesn't matter whether you're selling a sports shoe at retail or selling a complex medical solution. Your buyers are going to be spending their time on the internet and social media and apps and all that kind of stuff to get smarter. And so we must empower teams with skills and content. And I really love what Joelle said about soft skills and hard skills. Soft skills and hard skills. It probably won't be enough to give them just one or the other. You're going to have to give them both, because that digital buyer is going to be driving, I think, even more to put them under significant stress to help, for them to be able to differentiate in the market. One other trend, though, I thought we might talk about for 2021, which, again, I'd like to hear on the comments from folks about, is, look, I think we're seeing that it's not just the traditional salesperson that's benefiting from sales enablement technology. It's every customer-facing person. and even those that are external to the company, but are in that kind of revenue chain. We know that those people need connections to what the business is doing. For example, we had a customer in retail who, of course, due to the shutdown, had to change the way they were operating their retail environments. But they were able to pivot the use of Big Tin Can technology from the retail floor use to become that corporate communication solution to deliver and measure, first of all, information and training about the virus, but also to deliver company comms, company communications. And they basically pushed it out right to the cell phone, over 40,000 people all around the world, and did it in about 2 weeks. And I think that, combined with automation and machine learning, I think, Peter's spot on and about that, is that if you can think about where you could be smarter and you can have the computer help us to do things better, it's going to be more successful. Now, these are all things we wouldn't really have thought about doing, I think, with a legacy tech stack or even before maybe the pandemic. I think there's something else which is maybe positive for all the people watching this. I think for sales enablement practitioners, that's really all of you, is that, certainly you have a critical role to play to help your teams handle that stress that Doug was talking about. Many customer-facing workers are facing significant stress. They're not sure how their jobs are going to change forever. They're not sure about how their customers are going to work. So if you can find a way to provide that confidence and knowledge to your teams, they will, they will be more successful. They'll be more successful, and they'll be more, I think, confident in their ability to be able to get through these really challenging times. And again, Peter said this, to quote Peter, is that, sales enablement technology can be a solution to the challenges of COVID. It's not part of that legacy problem that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Sales enablement, as we know it in the term, as many people say, hasn't been around that long.
And it can help people solve problems, Julian. It can actually really give people back that confidence in this world of uncertainty. And if everybody out there embraces that, I think we can make a big difference to a whole lot of people. Yeah,
I think that's a great point to make. So, Peter, then, kind of streaming off of that, what's the data say about what we should be doing for 2021 in business?
As an officially trained analyst, Juliana, you had me at data. So, Doug said something about data-driven decision-making. Mm-hmm. I think 2020 has taught all of us how important data-driven decision-making is, but also to understand not only are we gathering it in the right way, is the source of that data real or fake, but also how do we interpret the data? One of the things that I love about my job is I don't care about the results. I just try to find what the story is. And if there's one particular datum, that is the singular of data, that I love the most from the research that we do, it's about the onboarding of B2B salespeople. And we look at organizations of all sorts. And when we classify them into high performing orgs versus low performing orgs, and you can guess what the metrics are that distinguish them from one another, it's mostly quota attainment. High performing organizations require 129% more field observations than low performing organizations before they will release someone into the wild, into the field. They're also more willing to think about onboarding as not an automatic pass to a field job, but as something that must be accomplished, maybe up or out type of thing. On the other hand, 18% of companies put B2B sellers in front of folks on the first day on the job. So I don't really know what to make about that stat. There's 5 points that I'd like to share from a data perspective, and they're about organizational needs that are evolving, the relevance of managers and customer and company culture, learning trends that we're seeing, time management, and this concept of revenue enablement, which is starting to evolve right now. So the first is this idea about organizational needs. What we find in our research is that when we ask individual contributor B2B sellers, what gets in your way? What are the barriers that prevent you from being successful? Low performing reps predominantly talk about skills. I can't connect my offerings to what my buyers need. I don't know how to handle objections. I'm not good at prospecting. My conversation and presentation skills aren't that good. What high performing reps tells us are the biggest barriers to getting their hitting their numbers and going to club are organizational issues, too much non-core selling, non-selling activities, time spent inside instead of in front of customers, virtually or physically. overly complex organizational barriers that make it hard just to do my job, regardless of company size. Inability to find proper buying-facing content and lack of quality buyer-facing content. These are organizational issues. You can, I mean, what's the phrase, people? You can't teach stupid. I don't know what the phrase is. I'm piggybacking off something Doug said earlier about don't be stupid. But what you have to actually focus on, and what we see organizations needing to tackle for 2021 and beyond, is the organizational barriers, which are not just about sales enablement, giving more training to the reps or creating more content for the reps, but actually having a voice at that executive table that says, hey, the environment that we're all in is hurting our ability to support our customers, our internal customers. I mean, if you're like me, you believe that the sales team or anybody who you enable are actually your customers. The second piece is this manager and cultural piece. We find when we ask folks, what are the top influences on your career decisions? Leaving sales jobs, picking a new sales employer, staying in a job, advocating for yourself, that high-performing reps are much more likely than low-performing reps to talk about how competent their first-line manager is, the work environment. Things like benefits, vacation time, access to club, those are nice, but it's more and more geared towards the culture itself. We have organizations, we work with multiple organizations who require, as part of sales onboarding, 1 day or more of mandatory volunteer work in the community. For those of us who are involved in the society who qualify as millennials, and you can be as old as 40 now and be a millennial, I own 3 of them. The money is always going to be first for the motivators for B2B sellers, but everything else is continuing to catch up quite a bit. And who you are as an organization, what is your stance on social justice issues? How do you deal with things that have nothing to do with your software or your products, but have to do with the society in which we all live in? These are becoming more important than ever. And 2020 has really amplified how important that is. And we mentioned managers earlier, Juliana. Overall, reps want to spend more time with their managers and vice versa. They don't, because of these organizational issues that get in the way. Number 3 is learning trends. They are changing. Every couple of years, we survey folks, sellers, managers, sales engineers, all customer-facing roles, to figure out, how do you like to learn and what are the components of learning that are most successful for you? And when we look at the high performing, the best sellers, the folks who are at or above quota year after year after year, for these guys, they focus on product knowledge, technology expertise, and skills development for the most part. I think Joel mentioned earlier business acumen training. That's higher in our 2019 data compared to 2017. Certification, being officially certified to do my job, again, to some of Joel's piece, is more popular among high performers than it was a couple of years earlier. And then finally, on the learning piece, when we talk about how do folks like to learn, anybody who's with us right now at this moment who may have seen some of our stuff or access to our portal or our analysts knows that we are very clear about how high-performing B2B reps want to learn and how they don't want to learn. They don't want to learn through podcasts and gamification and live webinars. They want to learn through interactive, collaborative means, on the job, informal learning. Classroom training is still okay, but it has to be done in a millennial-friendly, screen-friendly, asynchronous-friendly type of environment. And then the final 2 points that we're seeing where the data is leading us are time management and revenue enablement. So for time management, we have surveyed over 20,000 B2B salespeople over the last 4 or 5 years. And we do this for our customers, but we aggregate it all. And my buddy Dan puts together some incredible statistics for us. When we look at how individual contributor salespeople who are strong performers spend their time versus how they want to spend their time, it's remarkable what the deltas are. They want to spend so much more time than they're able to in front of their buyers on personal development, meeting one-on-one with their manager, mentoring other folks. But where they spend a lot more time than where these great performers are able to spend the time, and this goes for managers too, is data entry, internal communications, answering the email about whether I want chicken, fish, or veg at the company outing. And so these are, again, some organizational things that enablement really needs to try to influence in order to support the internal customer. And then finally, I think a lot of our speakers today have been sort of referencing the fact that sales enablement is morphing. The term revenue enablement is less about an org chart. It's less about specific titles, although it is starting to happen out there that we see revenue enablement, commercial enablement, go-to-market enablement. But the net is all of us guys we understand how to make sales professionals great. But the customer's journey isn't going to be complete if the other professionals they interact with are not equally and similarly enabled. So we're seeing customer success, solutions engineers, sales engineers, field marketers, partners, channel reps becoming more and more enabled by the same best practices around competency maps, asset management, content delivery, and communications to essentially support all customer facing roles. And, I think, David and Doug and Joelle have kind of referred to this already today. It's happening more and more, and we don't care about org charts and silos and turf wars. We just care that companies kind of get it. And again, that's kind of an upstream type of thing that needs to be sponsored and understood at the executive level so that enablement with a capital E can then bring it to bear for all of the different roles that they serve.
That's great. And I think what's also great is from a perspective of our audience, just listening to those 5 things. And if you're wondering what your own strategy should look like in 2021, from what we heard from Doug and from David and now from Peter, it's just, you can take those and start writing out your planning and how you're going to be effective to help pull the company that you work through, either through the pandemic and out, or wherever the stages of the company that you're in to really start to drive the, that value of sales enablement. That's not just about learning and more stuff being pushed at sellers, but really having that empathy for the customer facing roles and the seller and being their champion to be able to help them get through this as well, because everybody's struggling, right? It's not one or the other, or, one person or the other. All roles are trying to figure out and navigate this. And I think if we can be a step ahead or have a thought or a plan, just to Doug's point, let's pull those things through for our companies and people. I'm going to round out this round, and then we're going to go and move to some of the questions that have come in just from a timing perspective. But Joelle's going to talk about, and I think we can all relate to this. Academia, we've watched it be blown up from, K through 12 and beyond, all over the place because of the pandemic. I've personally created curriculum for my kids. I've helped them get online for the first time, and a lot of us are out there helping alongside our teachers way more than we ever thought we would. A lot of us have college kids that are still at home doing their curriculum. They didn't think they'd be having that. It's just completely blown up the academic space from a technology and a digital perspective. And so, Joelle, what are you doing now to start fostering that and bringing through the next generation of sales leaders?
Yeah. We are redefining academia and learning and teaching. Well, if you think about it, college and university employed 337,000 fewer people in August compared to February. And the losses and expenses was in spring over 46 billion. So this industry has been, let's say, this ecosystem, I started with that, has been impacted and disrupted a lot. We notice also, of course, lower enrollment, but mainly in undergrad, but more enrollment in grad education. So this is interesting. Looks like people are trying to pivot, looking for new skills. So that is interesting. But a lot of people, they don't want to go to college. They take a year off. And so I think it's important to think about, when you think about disruption here, especially in my field, how value is created. And it's important to recognize that value is based on 3 things, especially in academia. Actually, it's very close to enablement, sales enablement, revenue enablement, or commercial enablement, as you said, Peter. So the content, which is what is offered, the context, how this is offered, and the cadence when this is offered, right? So the content, and I think Doug is going to like that. I mean, providing the right content at the right time is critically important, right? And of course, David is going to like the importance of providing the learning at the right cadence and accelerate the learning for the people to learn fast. The problem we have in academia, and Peter mentioned that, is the credibility and reliability of the source of knowledge. So what is real, what is fake? Well, in academia, we do research and then we publish. But then this research is now digital based. So it's a raw material which can be shared very easily, very quickly, just like learning. And so becoming more commoditized. So it raised the question, why should I go to college to get something which is really available through digital platform? So I think that now academia needs to move, of course, focus a lot on the content to produce through research, real content and real research, because science matters. At Johns Hopkins University, science matters a lot, and science matters and knowledge matters a lot. So the content is still very important, but we are switching to a new context and a new cadence, which is how we're going to provide actually the knowledge and what is the new cadence for this virtual campus. And the professor's job is changing to becoming, I think, a little bit more like a technology enabler, and with the ability to make a difference in the distribution of knowledge, assuming that the knowledge is being produced, but the distribution of knowledge in the right context and with the right cadence is becoming critical. The problem we have is, especially because it's expensive to get, an education. Yes, it's even more expensive not to have one, of course. But what if you pay a lot for no physical experience? This is what is missing right now for college students. They have no physical experience. They go and learn remote. So peer learnings and the digital experience is critical. And we are not there yet. I've been using several tools in my class to create collaborative learning, because peer learning is critical in the classroom. But when you don't meet the people, how do you create this peer learning experience? So we have to facilitate that more and more, and also use our students to coach other students, more senior students to help more junior students to actually learn and go through the process. I've been using that, making my sales management MBA students becoming team leaders and coaches of my CRM students through Salesforce as an example, because this is a platform we can use to manage people. And I noticed that this collaboration and collective learning experience, peer learnings, although it's virtual, helps a lot solidify the knowledge and the distribution of knowledge. It's not just on the instructor anymore, because it's not just on the college anymore, but we have to redefine collaboration and knowledge sharing. So context and cadence is a big deal right now for us.
Terrific. I'm going to rotate a little bit, and I think we can probably all relate to that, Joel. And I would also say, hold the space. It's going to be shifting and changing a lot, right? And continuing to evolve as we go through this. For both Doug and David, one of the questions is, how have your own companies evolved purchasing process or criteria during the pandemic? Is there more justification? Are there lower approval thresholds? Squeeze existing vendors, CEO level scrutiny? What's been happening within your own companies as you go through this? Doug, why don't you go ahead and start in our same cadence?
Yeah, sure. Happy to jump in. Certainly, we're looking at all the acquisitions that we do, all the procurement processes with a finer lens than we did before. I think we're just trying to make sure that we're justifying everything that we buy, every additional spend and commitment that we do, especially things that are recurring in nature. It's just the whole environment here has predicated a more diligent approach to those things. We were on that road as part of preparations for potentially becoming public. I'm sure David's already probably well down that road. It's just certain discipline that you just need to have in place when you're in an environment where you have less control over some of the impacts that are happening. And we see that from our customers as well, the buying cycles. they're putting in place other steps in the process that weren't there before. They're squeezing even harder. Happy customers, want to get a discount. All those kinds of things are happening in ways that they weren't before. No question about it.
Great. David, what do you?
Well, look, I think, Doug's right. Certainly Big Tin Can's a public company, so slightly different levels of governance and review. But, there's no doubt that organizations, we are in our business, looking at things and saying, do we really need it? And it comes back to the point we were talking, I think all of us about before for sales enablement practitioners is sales enablement has to become part of the answer to these COVID challenges. If we become thought of as this old software doesn't really help and no one ever uses, it's going to be a challenge, because if it's not being used, if it's not driving that adoption and success and delivering an ROI, people aren't going to keep using it. And so that's happening in our business. I think it's happening in our market, that we've got to be able to be sure that we know how to describe the ROI, we measure the ROI, and we can communicate that.
Yeah, so I find it really fascinating as well, because from a Sales Enablement Society perspective, we have the most people at this conference than we've ever had at one of our conferences. Probably because it's digital. We also have the most people from different countries in quantity than we've ever had before. So, I think that, right, it's great. And I think that's very interesting. Exactly, David, to what you were saying is that we're actually more prevalent and we are growing, and we have to continue to be adding value to the organizations, and we'll continue to see that growth, as you're saying.
I mean, hopefully what Peter said. Peter said revenue enablement. And if revenue enablement is the future of our market, if that is true, and we'll find out maybe next conference whether that's true or not. But if revenue enablement is the future, that's a broad opportunity for sales enablement practitioners and professionals to help their companies even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also why SES is going to be partnering with JHU, the Science of Digital Business Development Institute, to create the first sales enablement program for executives in academia. And we're currently preparing that curriculum for 2021. But I think it's just that evolution from where we started in the grassroots to really becoming a thing, and the title of sales enablement being more prevalently used across LinkedIn, and just all the growth that we've all seen and we've been talking about. We are taking our own steps because people come to us and say, where should I go to learn, right? I imagine this is where sales curriculum was born out of the same thing. You have a profession, but you don't know how to go learn what you need to know to be successful in it. And so the Sales Enablement Society is going to be partnering with Joel and his university to make that happen in an academic area. So we're excited about that, and to your point as well. And so I'm going to keep us moving. There's another question, and this again is for Doug and David. I think are the right people to be addressing it. But how do you get your customers to see past the current crisis and get them to focus on? And it says 3 to 5 years down the road, which seems really far out to me right now. I don't know about you guys. I don't even know if they're ready to have those conversations, but what are you doing to see through this and try to have more strategic conversations?
Yeah, I would say with widely varying degrees of success, it's really difficult for people to think 3 to 5 years right now. I think 3 to 5 quarters is maybe more aspirational and realistic. I mean, you do need to try to put in place a story that they can understand about how they're transforming the business and how technology is going to help them, and how sales enablement is going to be a key part of that, kind of regardless of how the things that are beyond their control do evolve over time. But I think it's a huge challenge right now. They're focused first at home, at their own safety and security. And, when that feels okay, they're really worried about their jobs and the jobs of their friends and the markets that they're in. And I think getting people to, get past that is something that, is a huge challenge that we're all struggling and facing. But really telling the bigger picture story. This isn't going to undo. People aren't going to suddenly return to going face-to-face meetings. and the tools and the technology that they're putting in place are going to be critical to their success, and they will be at a competitive disadvantage if they don't move quickly during these particularly stressful and trying times.
Yeah, David.
Well, I think that's all true. And one thing, though, that certainly I believe, and I'd like to hear again what the people think out there, is that most humans over a 3 to 5 year view are pretty positive about the world. I think most people are pretty positive. And I think you only have to look at some of this amazing technology that's impacting us in so many different markets, whether it's self-driving cars or incredible advances in streaming technologies or new technologies around machine learning and artificial intelligence that apply to everything. I think many humans believe that in 3 to 5 years, we will take advantage of that technology. And if we can, we did a little presentation at Dreamforce a couple of years ago. We talked about the self-driving sales rep. And, whilst it was sort of tongue-in-cheek message, it's true, I think, that people believe that in that 3 to 5 year time frame, everybody in every industry or group will have assistance in the way we use a Siri or a Google Assistant now to help us to find directions. We will have tailored advice that guides us down the path of how we can work better and what we can do. And I think it really leads to, I think most people believe in this, that they know that the high-performing salespeople, as we heard from Peter, want to spend more time on the human things. So if technology can do some of those non-human things for us faster and better and give us back time for the human things, I'm convinced that's where the future of this industry goes. And I think over that 3 to 5 year time frame, revenue enablement, sales enablement, education enablement, whatever we call it, this principle that people are equipped with information, content, the stuff they need, and things are done for them with automation flows that really work. I think it's an inevitable future. And yes, it's going to be challenging, but there are some organizations that are thinking, gee, it is a time when that old analogy, when the factory is not operating, it's the best time to change all the machinery, update all the machinery. So I think there are people thinking that as well.
Yeah, that's great. So we have more questions, but we don't have more time. And what I'd like to do is give each of you about 45 seconds to just, what would your closing sentiment be for the society, for everybody that you're addressing that are sales enablement practitioners, academics, analysts, our whole community that's here to elevate sales enablement in general. And Doug, we'll go ahead and start with you. We've got 45 seconds each. Go.
Yeah. Thanks, Julianne. I really appreciate the opportunity today. Really appreciate the work that Sales Enablement Society is doing. I think it's really important that we have a neutral, vendor agnostic place to go as practitioners, that we can all support, where people can learn and help develop what the future is going to look like. Initiatives like the education certification program that you're talking about. All these things I think are critically important. And really appreciate that you guys are doing that. With David, I think the future is bright. We are going to get through this, and sales enablement is going to be a huge piece of how all organizations sell into the future.
All right, David, great.
Yeah, look, stay strong, sales enablement practitioners. You are making a difference. I think if you can keep doing what you're doing for your humans and really remember that impact you're going to have on your humans, you're going to build an ongoing, amazing community. I can remember the Dallas event. I remember being there and I'm thinking, wow, this really is something special. And since Dallas, we've been involved in every event, and I just am so impressed with the work that the real, actual humans have done at the Sales Enablement Society all over the world to bring together people and make this into a real industry. When Dallas happened, this was not a real industry. It really wasn't. Honestly, it wasn't. Many people came to us and said, yeah, great little feature you've got there, but it's not its own standalone market. Well, I think you've proven that it is. So all I can say is keep going. Let's build a great future together.
Terrific. Peter.
I think most of the people in this community are true sales enablers. Whether your background is having carried a bag yourself or not, you understand the mindset and the persona of the folks that we serve. A lot of the folks who are not members of this group are sales inflictors, not sales enablers. Let's teach them. Let's make sure that the term coin operated is never used. Let's make sure that guided selling is not overused. Creating the opportunity for folks to think on their feet and be great in front of their buyers and customers should be part of our charter. But just trying to script out every single thing that they say and send and do, like a coin-operated something or other, that's inflictment, not enablement. Let's make sure that we are enabling and that we encourage our peers in the industry to do the same, because then we'll have that kind of voice that we've talked about tonight that is listened to in the executive suite.
Terrific. Joel, 45 seconds.
I'd like to say that in challenging times, like you mentioned, David, difficult times, we have to change the definition of difficulty. That's it. We have to change really what we mean by difficulty. And I'm really glad when it comes to sales enablement that we are going to change that as well and contribute with the Sales Enablement Society to create the first executive program fully dedicated to the discipline and sales enablement. I would like to see more research. One great piece of research is coming out from my friend Rob Peterson with three other colleagues, Howard Dover and Albina Mash and Scott Friend. To make sales enablement a discipline, we need research and we need case studies. There's no way we can teach a discipline if we don't have case studies. There's a lot of cases to teach. Let's teach them and change the definition of difficulty to actually somehow, change the world and make it better.
Fantastic. And Joel took us all the way up to 0 minutes left. So perfect timing. Again, I want to thank our sponsors, David and Doug, and your companies for continuing to back the Sales Enablement Society. When we first had the thought of bringing you both onto a stage together, it was kind of like, well, who else should we buffer it with? We had a funny discussion, but there was immediate yeses from both of you. And I appreciate that you're willing to get on a stage together, talk about the challenges, and the opportunity that we all have to face together. And there's really a mentality of abundance, which you don't always find everywhere. And I think that is what's special about the Sales Enablement Society. And what Peter was saying was we kind of put down our guard and we come together to help each other. And you don't always see that in a community, especially as large as we are. So I thank both of you for being willing to play ball with us, and Peter and Joel for joining in on the fun and adding your perspectives. It's really been great. I'm going to wrap up for day one. We are through day one of the SES 2020 virtual conference, which is crazy. And we're looking forward to day two and more rich conversations and engagement. Feel free to get into the community and post. There's areas in the main stage. If your questions were answered, try it there. Somebody might come and answer your questions. You never know. So have a wonderful evening, morning, day, wherever it is that you're at. And we'll look forward to seeing you back here in the same spot tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
You.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.